Hello, and welcome back to Illusion of Invisibility, Frameworks of Perception. I'm Emily Carter, and I'm joined by my brilliant co-host, Angela Brooks. Today's episode is called Seeing What Isn't There, which, honestly, is a bit of a mind-bender, isn't it?
It really is, Emily, and I love that title because it gets right to the heart of how our minds can, kind of trick us. We're not just passive observers of the world. Our brains are constantly constructing reality based on what we already believe, what we expect, and even what we want to see.
Exactly, and that's not just us saying it. Richard Feynman, the physicist, actually said, you have to be in some framework that you allow something to be true. So it's like, if you don't have the right mental map, you might not even notice something, even if it's right in front of you.
Right. And Daniel Gilbert, building on Kant's ideas, points out that our perceptions are more like portraits than photographs. We're not just taking in raw data. We're mixing what we see with what we already know, feel, or believe. So the artist's hand is always there, shaping what we notice or don't.
That reminds me of Gestalt psychology, especially Metzger's work. He talks about how things that naturally belong together get organized together in our minds. So, if something fits into a pattern, we just we don't see it as separate. It can actually disappear from our view, even though it's completely exposed. Metzger even suggested you could make a party game out of openly hiding things like pencils or erasers, just by placing them where they seem to belong.
I love that example. It's like camouflage, but for the mind. And it's not just about objects, right? It's about ideas, too. If something doesn't fit our mental framework, we might not even register it as important or real.
Oh, absolutely. I actually had a moment like that not too long ago. I was at a community meeting, and I completely misread the mood in the room. I thought everyone was on board with this new project, but it turned out there was a lot of quiet resistance. I just didn't see it because I was so sure everyone shared my enthusiasm. My own assumptions, my schemata, if you will, made me blind to what was right in front of me.
That's such a good example, Emily, and it's so relatable. I think we all do that in big and small ways. Our brains want things to fit together, so we kind of smooth over the rough edges or just ignore the bits that don't fit.
Yeah, and it's not always a bad thing. I mean, if we didn't have these frameworks, we'd be overwhelmed by information. But it does mean we have to be careful about what we might be missing.
So let's dig into what happens when something doesn't fit, when there's an anomaly. Alan Lightman and Owen Gingerich wrote about how scientific anomalies are often invisible until a new framework comes along. Before that, those odd facts are just ignored or explained away. They're not even seen as anomalies. They're just invisible.
It's wild, isn't it? Kevin Kelly put it really well. The real anomalies are at first not even perceived as anomalies. It's like, until we have a new way of thinking, we literally can't see what's odd or out of place.
And that's not just in science. In complex systems like public health or, say, big organizations, sometimes you have to believe something is possible before you can even see it. Charles Perrow said, "Sometimes we must believe before we can see." That's so counterintuitive, but it's true.
Yeah, and Goldratt talks about hidden assumptions. Our brains, like any system, make assumptions about the environment. If something doesn't fit those assumptions, we just don't process it. It's like our mental software isn't programmed to notice it.
That reminds me of a public health case I worked on years ago. There was this outbreak, and for weeks, nobody could figure out what was going on. The data was there, but it didn't fit our existing models, so we just didn't see the pattern. It wasn't until someone challenged the assumptions, like, what if it's not foodborne but airborne, that the pieces fell into place. Suddenly, what was invisible became obvious, but it took a crisis to force us to see differently.
That's such a powerful story. And it really shows how, in complex systems, judgment and perception are totally intertwined. Michael Lewis quotes Amos Tversky saying, "It cannot be that judgment does not connect with perception. Thinking is not a separate act. So the way we think shapes what we see, and vice versa."
Exactly. And sometimes the only way to see the anomaly is to step outside the old framework. But that's hard because our brains really, really like stability. They want things to make sense, even if that means ignoring inconvenient facts.
So, let's talk about how all this shapes our decisions. Michael Lewis talks about choice architecture, the idea that people don't just choose between things, they choose between descriptions of things. The way information is presented actually constructs our preferences.
Yeah, and that's huge in public health too. The way you frame a risk or a treatment option can totally change what people decide. It's not just about the facts, it's about how those facts fit into people's existing frameworks.
And DeSalvo's work on schemata explains why. Our brains want stability. When new information threatens a well-established schema, the brain reacts as if it's under threat. So we either ignore the new info or we file it away as an outlier, something that doesn't really count. It's all about keeping things comfortable and consistent.
That's why, in finance, you get these moments where the whole system misses something huge. Like Benoit Mandelbrot noticed that financial markets had fat tails. Big, rare events happened way more often than the models predicted. But because that didn't fit the efficient market hypothesis, people just kind of looked the other way, even when the data was right there.
And then you get a crash, like in 1987, and suddenly everyone has to confront the fact that the old models don't work in a crisis. But until that moment, the anomalies were basically invisible because the framework couldn't handle them.
It's a bit like that old joke about the Soviet statistician when asked, "What's 2 plus 2?" He says, "How many do you want it to be?" Sometimes the framework is so powerful that it shapes not just what we see, but what we think is even possible to see.
So, I guess the big takeaway is that our choices, our perceptions, even our sense of reality, they're all constructed. And if we want to see what's really there, sometimes we have to challenge our own frameworks, even if it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And that's not easy, but it's where real discovery happens. Well, Emily, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on today.
We definitely have. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We'll be back soon to dig even deeper into how our minds shape what we see and what we miss. Angela, always a pleasure.
Likewise, Emily. Take care, everyone, and see you next time on Illusion of Invisibility.